Wow, so we just heard about believing in something. Would you believe that your lifestyle can actually change your genes? Maybe if you take enough vitamins, you can stave off aging. Well, I don't know if that's actually true, but this is actually a picture of my kitchen counter, and I do take a lot of those vitamins every day. So I want you to imagine that you could go back in time 20 years. You know, Nirvana's Smell Like Teen Spirit is on the top of the charts. Your television sets are tuned into Star Trek: The Next Generation. But more importantly, you're 20 years younger. So what makes you younger? Well, you're younger because the cells in your body are younger. So how is it that your cells get older? Well, every cell in your body contains DNA. And this DNA is actually in chromosomes. And at the end of your chromosomes are telomeres. These telomeres here are shown in yellow. They're the tips, they're the caps at the end of your chromosomes that actually protect the DNA inside those chromosomes from degrading and deteriorating, from acquiring mutations that cause cancer. You can think of telomeres sort of like the tips of shoelaces. They protect them from fraying. In fact, telomere length is like a biological clock. So every time a cell in your body divides, your telomeres get shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter until eventually there's no telomeres left and your cells will either retire or they'll die. So to put it simply, as your telomeres get shorter, your life gets shorter. Now, telomere shortening is observed in aging cells, but it's also found in some rare diseases, such as Werner Syndrome. Now, in people that have Werner Syndrome actually develop normally up until about puberty. And after puberty, they age rapidly, and they often appear several years older than they are. Now, telomere shortening is actually attributed to many of the pathological manifestations of this disease. So we actually lose 21 nucleotides, which are structural units, off of our telomeres every year. And I don't know about you, but those telomeres look kind of short already, and I'm like trying to hold on to them as much as they can, you know? So there are some things that you can do to actually increase your telomere length. So basically, this UC Davis study found that people that meditated were able to increase the activity of this enzyme called telomerase, which is able to rebuild telomeres. Not only that, they actually had longer telomeres. And this is really cool because actually telomerase, this enzyme, most of the cells in our body don't express it. It's not very active. So the fact that meditation can increase the activity of that enzyme is pretty awesome. In fact, those Buddhist monks that are often advocating meditation may have some truth to the fact that it does promote healthy well-being. So what's that to say about our stressful lives? I'm pretty sure I don't have to tell you what this guy looks like he's about to say. But this UCSF study found that stress actually accelerates the aging process by shortening your telomeres. In fact, the study found that people that were under severe stress had telomere length that was equal to 10 years of accelerated aging. But not everyone under stress has short telomeres. Actually, exercise can buffer the effects, the negative effects of stress. And that's because exercise actually lengthens your telomeres. So in this King's College study, they found that people that exercise the most actually have the longest telomeres. And those people with sedentary lifestyles had the shortest telomeres. And in fact, that telomere shortening, again, corresponded to 10 years of aging. Vitamin D also regulates your telomere length. In another study, they found that basically people that had the highest levels of vitamin D also had the longest telomeres. And the ones that had the lowest levels of vitamin D had the shortest telomeres. And vitamin D is actually essential in the aging process. Just to highlight the importance of this, these mice are the same age. The mouse on the left has not had any vitamin D throughout its life. The mouse on the right has had normal levels of vitamin D. So not having vitamin D can accelerate the aging process. So there's really two types of aging. There's chronological aging, which is how old you are in years. And there's biological aging, which is how old your cells appear to be based on telomere length. Because telomere length is a marker for biological aging. So you can imagine that one person could be several years older or several years younger than their actual chronological age. And speaking of healthy aging, these monkeys are the same age. This monkey on the left here has had a normal diet throughout its life. The monkey on the right has had 30% less food for its entire life. This is called caloric restriction. In this University of Wisconsin study, not only did these mice appear to be younger, they were younger. They were able to prevent and delay the onset of several age-related diseases, such as cancer, diabetes, heart disease, and brain atrophy. In fact, this University of Wisconsin study found that those monkeys had changes in gene expression. So we can actually measure the change in gene expression, thousands of genes at once, using gene expression profiling. So genes that are highly expressed, those genes are active, they're turned on, they're doing what they're supposed to do. Those are indicated in red. And the genes that are lowly expressed, those are turned off. They're not doing what they're supposed to do. It's almost as if they weren't there. Those are indicated in green. And what the study found was that those monkeys that had a normal diet were increasing the expression of bad genes, genes that promote inflammation. And they were decreasing the expression of good genes, genes that basically are responsible for neurotrophic factors. Neurotrophic factors are essential for the survival of your brain cells. But the caloric-restricted monkeys, those monkeys that were eating less, actually had the opposite in gene expression. They were increasing the good genes, like neurotrophic factors, and decreasing the bad ones, like the ones that promote inflammation. So what causes these changes in gene expression? What's causing these things? Well, meet the epigenome. So this is a very simplistic version of it. Basically, epigenetics refers to changes in gene expression without actually altering your genetic code, without changing the DNA nucleotide sequence. They sit on top of your DNA, and they turn genes on, they turn genes off. And these epigenetic marks that are sitting up there, they're regulated by our environment, by what we're eating, by what time of day it is, by how much stress we're under, how much exercise we do. And the really amazing thing about these epigenetic marks is that they can be passed on to your children and your grandchildren. Now this is something Lamarckian genetics that was thought to sort of be crazy. But now we're finding out that it's actually true. These epigenetic marks can be passed on to our offspring. So just think about that for a minute. What you're doing in your environment, how you're living your lifestyle, actually can affect the children that you haven't had yet. So to highlight the importance of this, I'm going to tell you a story about Norrbotten, Sweden. Norrbotten is the northern coast region of Sweden. It's really sort of isolated. It's kind of referred to as a no man's land. So during the 19th century, they went through periods of famine and feast, and famine and feast. When the crop harvest was good, there was an overabundance of food, and people gorged themselves. When the crop harvest was poor, there was hardly any food around, and people were on the brink of starvation. There was barely enough food to survive. And this provided a very unique opportunity to study what the long-term effects were on those children growing up in the feast versus the famine years in Norrbotten. And more importantly, if those long-term effects could be passed on to future generations. And so the Dutch study found they basically followed male children that were born in the early 1900s. And through historical and agricultural records, they were able to determine how much food was available to this child's grandfather. So, whether or not this grandfather was growing up during the feast or famine years, that basically determined how much food was available to them. And what the study found was astonishing. So when the grandfathers were children, when they were young, between the ages of 9 and 12, if they were growing up during the feast years, they basically produced children and grandchildren that lived 32 years shorter lives. 32 years. So what this guy was eating affected this guy's lifespan. Absolutely unbelievable. So there's actually good and bad news about epigenetics. The bad news is your bad lifestyle. I don't think I have to say much about this guy. Obviously, he's not doing himself any good, but now what we know is that those bad lifestyle habits have negative health consequences that can actually be passed on to your children and grandchildren. Okay, in this Australian study, they fed male mice a high-fat diet. And basically, those male mice became obese and they got diabetes. Wasn't a big surprise. The surprise is that they produced daughters that were not obese, but did get diabetes later in life. So what those male mice ate affected epigenetically their daughter's predisposition to diabetes. The good news is you can make the right lifestyle changes, increase the youthful part of your life, and pass that longevity on to your children and grandchildren. In this Duke study, they basically took female mice that have a yellow fur coat. Now this yellow fur coat is a bad thing, and I'll tell you why. The gene that encodes for this yellow fur also predisposes these mice to diabetes and cancer. So when they have this yellow fur, it's pretty much not a good thing because they most probably are going to get one of these age-related diseases. And what the researchers did was they fed these mice a diet high in B vitamins, folic acid, vitamin B12, a few weeks before they actually were pregnant. And what they did was they were able to produce offspring that no longer had the yellow fur. They now had brown fur. And they no longer had predisposition to those diabetes and cancer and bad diseases. And that was because the diet that was high in B vitamins silenced the gene that produces the yellow fur. So the epigenetic regulation was passed on to the offspring. Even something as complex as learning and memory can be influenced by your environment and genetically transferred to your offspring. This study was published in the Journal of Neuroscience a couple of years ago. They genetically engineered mice to get neurodegenerative disease. These mice had very poor memory and learning deficits. And what they did was they put these mice in what's called an enriched environment. These mice were in a cage with lots of toys. It was kind of like Disneyland, you know. They basically stimulated a variety of different regions of the brain. And what they found was that these mice not only had improved learning and memory, but they also increased the connections between neurons, those connections that are essential for learning. But what was astounding by this study was that their offspring, the children of these mice, which also had neurodegenerative disease, had the same learning and memory benefits. They were also better, had scored better on learning and memory tests and had the same increases in neuronal connectivity. But those mice were not exposed to this enriched environment. So those positive learning benefits were actually passed on epigenetically to the offspring. And these types of benefits aren't limited to mice. So in this study from Columbia, they found that people that exercise up to 4 hours a week can actually increase neurogenesis. That's the growth of new brain cells. Don't you remember when they tell you, oh, you can never grow new brain cells? Well, they're wrong. Not only that, they were able to increase the size of their hippocampus. That's the part of your brain involved in learning and memory. So naturally, the next question is, can epigenetics reverse disease? So this UCF study took 30 men that had low-risk prostate cancer. So they had prostate cancer that was not very aggressive. And these men decided they did not want to undergo conventional chemotherapeutic treatment. They decided they wanted to make lifestyle changes, drastic ones. So they went on a diet that was mostly plant-based, very low fat, little to no processed foods. They supplemented with omega-3, vitamin C and E. They exercised 30 minutes a day, 6 days a week, and they did meditation or yoga for 1 hour a day every day. And 3 months later, after making this lifestyle change, their prostate was biopsied. And what they found was amazing. These men actually changed the gene expression in over 500 genes in their prostate from this lifestyle change. In fact, they basically turned down, they lowered the expression of these bad genes, genes that promote cancer, genes that promote disease. They essentially turned those genes off. And they turned on the good genes, the genes that are preventing disease, the genes that suppress tumor formation. In fact, many of those genes that they turned on are the targets of a variety of different pharmaceutical drugs. So if you think about it, you can get the same positive benefits that these pharmaceutical drugs can give you for cheaper, and the only side effects are good ones, like a firm butt. So you may want to think about making those lifestyle changes, and you should. I hope you're motivated to make the right lifestyle changes because your DNA is not set in stone. You can change your DNA. It's not a code, that you and your children and grandchildren have to abide by. You can make positive lifestyle changes, change the expression of your genes, get rid of the bad ones, get more of the good ones, and help you age better, increase that youthful part of your life. Make those changes. Thank you. In case you want to see the 20 studies I mentioned today, you can link to them if you'd like.